Hello, good night. This is U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I'm here live to take your U.S. immigration related questions. And I do have an update for you, and then I'm going to answer some questions. But I want to touch on some crazy things that are happening in Florida. So in January, we have had some. So while in Minnesota, we have a surge of officers, ICE officers, going in and harassing immigrants, even legal immigrants in Minnesota. In Florida, there's something else that's happening. And the way that they're making it untenable for undocumented immigrants to live in Florida is through by passing laws and by ensuring that law enforcement officers in all counties work, even on university grounds, work with ICE. So what we're seeing is we're seeing a quieter way of enforcement. It's quieter, it's sneakier, but it is causing a mass detention of immigrants in another type of way. So they're not necessarily just barging into homes or barging into businesses like what was happening in Minnesota, but what they're doing is they're quietly targeting people through traffic stops. So if for example, I have seen that happen where people are stopped, right, just going about their day, but they to the officer, to police officer, they've stopped them for something very minor. Usually they ask them for their driver's license. Maybe they were speeding. They look into their driver's license and they realize that they appear as if they don't have status. And so once what we're seeing is once they are, I've seen even people who have their papers being stopped by officers that are handed over to ICE. So we did see that, for example, with someone who they were in the middle of applying for asylum, and the police officer completely disregarded that, calling ICE. ICE detained him. So they are targeting immigrants, and if to the police officer the immigrant looks as if they don't have their papers, they're calling ICE in, and ICE is taking people in and asking questions later. But here is what else is happening. So we have two Senate bills in Florida that are now in the process of moving through the legislative process. And we've seen crazy bills being passed in Florida already. So this is very much a possibility that it is going to pass in Florida. The first is, I'm going to tell you some of the changes. So Senate Bill 1380, Senate Bill 1307, look it up. And the way that they're making it untenable for immigrants to live in, undocumented immigrants to live in Florida, is they're prohibiting commercial driver's license. If the undocumented immigrant is working for an employer, for example, you have many immigrants who work in construction. They work in hospitality industries. They work in agricultural industries. And many of this is hard labor. So the risk of injury is very high. And what's happening is they are covered under workers' compensation, right? If they get injured, the employer has special insurance that can cover their medical bills to tend to their injuries. Well, what they're saying here is that they're going to now stop undocumented immigrants from getting workers' compensation. This is a workers' rights issue, possibly a safety issue. And keep in mind, I have seen it before where traffickers who employ undocumented immigrants can also use this to abuse undocumented immigrants, to subject undocumented immigrants to situations where they get injured, they face higher risk of injury, and not necessarily feel the need, or let them feel as if they don't need to cover the cost of their injuries because of a law like this. So getting injured on the job could mean that you don't get covered for workers' compensation. They're also prohibiting undocumented immigrants from getting bank accounts from state chartered banks and also for cashier checks. So usually banks don't necessarily discriminate. If you have an ITIN number, if you have a social security number, you can get a bank account regardless of your immigration status. Well, this would stop that from happening. So they would not be able to get bank accounts. And now they are targeting employers in that saying, if undocumented immigrants are injured on the job, the employer has to pay a fine for that. And then here's the craziest one. If an undocumented immigrant is driving and they are meeting an accident and that car accident is not their fault, they are maybe hit by another car, because of their undocumented status, their car insurance, the insurance that covers them, will be at fault, which ultimately means that the undocumented immigrant will then be at fault. No matter if it was the fault of the other person, it doesn't matter if they're undocumented, the insurance company has to pay out the payout for that as if it was the fault of the undocumented immigrant. Some scary, scary immigration proposals, but we have seen it's crazy in Florida. We have seen crazy laws being passed, and it looks like it's getting worse. So just be wary of that. If you are in Florida, you are thinking about coming to Florida, you've heard me say it before, it is not, Florida is not the state to be in, just because there, the kinds of laws that are being passed, the kind of immigration enforcement that is happening here, it is not safe. All right. So is this for all the states? No, I'm talking about Florida. But what I say here is if you are here in Florida or you're anywhere, make sure you are evaluating your options to get relief, to get status. That is my job here, is to be able to find those solutions. That is how I am fighting for my clients, fighting for immigrants, is looking at what's available and ensuring that our clients can get protection before anything like detention happens. But even if you're detained, keep in mind there are still ways to get relief in immigration court to move forward. But I always say that gets stressful. Look at your options before anything like that happens. All right. So now I want to just dedicate some time to answering questions. Put your questions in the comments. Thank you so much on YouTube. Christian, thank you. My mother-in-law is treating me that she is going to report me to ICE that my marriage with her son is a fraud. I have a green card through, I think I see vase. Do I need to fear? So if you have a 10-year green card, you definitely always seek legal advice, right? Because in a time like this, if your mother-in-law is threatening you about that, you want to make sure that you document your marriage to show that it is real. You continue to gather documents, evidence showing that your marriage is real. So that if they do investigate or if they do come to you about this tip, because yes, they are accepting tips like this, that you can show that what your mother-in-law is saying is not true. But you can always call, talk to us. I would say where I would be most worried is if you're going from a 2-year green card to a 10-year green card. So if you have the conditional green card and now your mother-in-law is threatening you, then you need to talk to us to figure out what's your rights and how to move past that and how to protect your rights. There are ways to protect your rights. If you have the 10-year green card, I would worry less, but just make sure you're gathering the documents to show that what your mother-in-law is saying is not true. Yes, you have the 10-year green card. So if you have the 10-year green card, then that's where I would say just make sure you gather evidence. Oh, through VAWA. So you have it through VAWA. Keep the evidence. Make sure you keep the evidence to show that your marriage was real. That if you have any evidence of abuse, keep the threats. Make sure you are documenting all your mother-in-law's threats. If she's texting you, calling you, make sure you're recording dates and times that your mother-in-law is threatening you, who is calling you, and giving you these kinds of threats. Because if that should ever come back up because your mother-in-law followed through with a threat like that, you can also show that she was the one that was harassing you. Hi there, Damaine. Nice to see you. Hi there, Maria. Nice to see you. Hi there, Zeros. Nice to see you. I have a VAWA almost 3 years on September. No request for evidence for prima facie. I think what to expect. You could what we are seeing, the pattern we're seeing is the request for evidence. And yes, they're issuing, I'm getting requests for evidence for even very simple things, which I always prefer requests for evidence for simple things, but it can get frustrating, especially when maybe they've lost the file and that's why they're asking for something we've already provided. But we are seeing requests for evidence coming in towards the 3.5 year mark when they are about to make a decision. So if they have additional questions, you may get a request for evidence right before they make a decision, maybe even around now. So that could be what to expect. Or you get that decision, you get your VAWA approved first, and then they start processing you for your green card approval, which they sometimes schedule an interview for in the adjustment, if you file an adjustment of status. All right. I am on Instagram next, and then I'm going to be on TikTok. So put your questions in the comments, and then I'm going to scroll through, catch up on those questions. Good night. Via VAWA, I got a prima facie letter, advanced parole, did my biometrics since 2024. What's next and how long? If you went ahead and you applied for a work permit, that would come next. I see you got the advanced parole, so that's fine. Just be sure that you're getting legal advice about your risk to travel. Travel has become riskier now. And then a decision. So there's a long gap in between, and then they make a decision at around the 3.5 year mark, just because the processing time is that long. But you do get your work permit and your travel document during this time. Okay, so hi there, VAWA case pending. Did biometrics for I-130. So is that an I-360, APEAD? Now they've scheduled another for my I-45. Is that a good sign? Oh, okay. So I think you mean an I-360. That's what a VAWA form is. The I-130 is usually for spouses or family. But yes, we've seen that where they've scheduled another biometrics for a separate form. But keep in mind that you always want to make sure that you are looking at your risk. Anytime you get called in for an appointment, make sure I don't know your risk. I'm not your attorney. So I don't know what kind of risk that you face. For example, Having a previous removal order can raise your risk of possible enforcement. So or at the interviews or a biometrics interview. So, a criminal record could also raise your risk. So it just depends. I don't want to scare you, but I do want to let you know that it depends on your circumstances. Biometrics appointments, though, for different forms is not strange. If you're married to a convicted felon, can you still do an adjustment of status? It's possible, but in some cases, if the criminal offense falls under the Adam Walsh Act, which says that the victim or a minor was harmed in the process of the offense, they could be banned. Traveling in I-751 extension letter. Um, Let me see, I don't see your previous question. Traveling with an I-751 extension letter, that is basically saying you're a green card holder for the period of time that they've given you an extension on your green card, is still gives you the ability to travel. But you just want to make sure that you're not facing any increased risk of possible uh, issues at the airport. So, extensive travel outside of the United States, criminal history, any suspicions of fraud in your past applications can be a problem at the airport or port of entry when you're coming back in. So, this is where it's very important to have an attorney evaluate any kind of risk before you travel. Charged with manslaughter. Okay, and if it involved a minor, that's where the problem is going to be under the Adam Walsh Act. If you, so I answered that. I'm going through on Instagram. Thank you so much for the love on TikTok. I appreciate it. Hi there, Nadia. It's nice to see you. Hi there in Argentina. Thanks for joining. Hello. Thanks for the love, guys. I really appreciate that. All right. In removal proceedings for T visa, what possibilities for removal 12 months now for the T visa? So I'm not sure. I am getting from this. So you're in removal proceedings. What possibility for removal? 12 months now for the T visa. So one thing with the T visa is we are representing clients who are in removal proceedings, and the T visa has allowed us, the judge, to be able to consider that there is pending relief, and the judge has put the final hearing dates further out in order to allow time for the adjudication of the T visa. So the T visa can be helpful in that it is another avenue to get your removal proceedings canceled after an approval of a T visa. I don't know if that's what you're asking, but it's very important that in the pleadings to the court that you do make sure you make clear that you do qualify for relief as a T visa applicant. Good night. If I apply for asylum recently and after 2 months I get married, would it be a problem for asylum? It may not be. It just depends. You know, it just depends. It's the same with every application. When you're applying for multiple forms of relief at the same time, you want to ensure that it's one isn't going to contradict the other, or one isn't going to conflict with the other, what are the facts in one versus the other. I mean, of course, everything should be true in your application, but you just have to be very careful with having multiple forms of relief going at the same time and whether it really makes sense. If you are married to a okay, so I answered that. Let's see. Thank you so much for the love on TikTok. I appreciate it. If an absent parent lives in JA, how do you naturalize parent? How did a naturalized parent file for a minor passport in USA? Well, I don't usually apply for passports for myself and my child, of course, but it's not usually something we do in the office. But what I would say is there's a special form that can be completed, and you can call them as well. But there's a special form that you can complete to show that the parent is absent or you're unable to find the parent. And then also, if you're the only parent on the birth certificate, that usually is helpful. It's usually where two parents are on the birth certificate. That's an issue. So if one parent is on the birth certificate, usually you are able to move forward and get the authorized passport. And then the other is by getting a court order. So if the court has found that you're the sole parent and you have authority to do things like apply for your child's passport on your own, that could be a way as well. So it really just depends on what is the easiest path for you. Yes, yes, I definitely understand. So, how's everything going with you? Long time. It's very hard. Keep holding on. Absolutely. Thank you for your words, and I would say the same for you and everyone. Just keep trekking, keep going. The individuals who make it are the ones who persevere. Keep pushing. They often say the race is not for the swift, but for those who persevere. So keep pushing, keep holding on, and keep taking action that's going to get you to your goal. All right, so now I'm on TikTok. Let me see. I am doing a marriage based green card or adjustment of status. So I went and did my biometrics about 4 months ago and nothing yet. It seems like everything is at fan steel. Should I be worried? I'm doing a marriage based green card. So I would say that they are moving faster to schedule interviews. So we've been seeing interviews coming within 3 months to 6 months of filing. But you can be prepared for even a longer time, and it all depends on what it's looking at the USCIS office closest to you where you have to do the interview. If they're inundated with cases, that may mean it might take a little longer. Can I withdraw my case public attorney to a private attorney even if my asylum is pending for almost 10 years? It's always your right to change attorneys. Absolutely. I am about to apply for VAWA, but my lawyer did not correct my declaration. It's very important. That declaration is a central evidentiary document. You must make sure where you identify it needs to be corrected, that it is. I applied T visa on November 2023. They don't ask me any request for evidence, how long I need to wait. So it's the processing time is about 2 years. So you are over the processing times. And sometimes when you're over the processing times, you can request an expedite. So, it's always best to check on your case. Okay, I'm on TikTok. Put your questions in the comments. Hi there, Sasha Love. Always nice to see you. Um, Me and my wife live together on collect collection. We don't have a lease, and I'm worried. Can we apply? So I see collocation. I'm not sure what that is, but I would say this: if you, however you're living together, make sure you're compiling evidence of that. And once you get the evidence of that, document other things as well. Make sure you're documenting other things that show your marriage is real. Is it okay to travel on an expired green card and an extension letter? If you're going from a 2 year to a 10 year, you have the extension letter. Yes, you can. You usually have the expired green card with you, the extension letter, your passport to travel. Then that's fine. Yeah, just make sure you have the original extension letter, not a copy of it. Any update about Yemen TPS, and what do you think? Are they gonna renew it? So the pattern that we've seen is that they are not renewing any TPS that they terminate. I don't have any particular updates about Yemen, but what I can tell you is the trend is they're basically going down the line and terminating TPS for countries, and they are taking it to court. Some courts are blocking the ending of TPS, but then the appeal court, we've seen multiple instances where the appeal court is lifting the block to terminate, meaning the appeal court is saying that the administration can terminate TPS. Today, the appeal courts did that, not for Haiti, but this is also a bad sign for Haiti because the overall pattern that we've seen from the appellate courts as well as high as the Supreme Court is that they're constantly siding with the administration on terminating on their right to terminate TPS. So they've appealed the judge's decision to halt the termination of TPS for Haitian citizens, and they've appealed it. So what that means is that there is a possibility that the appellate court can say they can move forward with terminating TPS. So the trend is when they're ready to terminate TPS, the appellate court and the Supreme Court has sided with the government on that. But keep in mind here, even though TPS is terminated, it's important. It does not mean you're barred from other types of relief. Though, yes, there are additional factors going on, like a ban. So whether you're subject to a ban on certain immigration benefits, that we can talk about though. But there are, and keep in mind, even if you're in the country, for example, and they've paused your case, you can still apply, and you must still apply to continue to maintain your ability to get the benefit in the future. Because guess what? Night doesn't last forever, right? And you want to be prepared for when daylight comes. So in this case, what I mean is this could be temporary, and you don't want to miss an opportunity to apply for relief, miss a deadline, a policy change could happen that stops you from being able to be in line to get the benefit. So still prepare for better times, better days. And this could give you protection. If you're here, you're without your papers, you can still possibly get protection. Me and my wife live together okay, so I answered that. When you're going through the marriage-based process, make sure you're gathering all evidence. So for here's an example of what to do. If you live with a relative, maybe you and your spouse, you have a roommate, right? A relative that you're living with, have that relative draft an affidavit attesting to the fact that you both live with them and you divide the rent. Right, that's an example. If you don't have a formal, you have a landlord, but you don't have a formal lease agreement, have the landlord draft a landlord verification document signed and notarized stating that you both do rent from them. So those are examples of if you're not in a usual living situation where you have a lease agreement, there are ways to show that you do live together. I filed I-751. The 48 months is about to end. Can I file for citizenship or I should wait? I'm divorced. This is really a strategic question. However, you do have the ability, if you qualify for citizenship while your I-751 is pending, you have the ability to apply. Should I wait? I'm divorced. So there's a lot going on here, but this is where I say you're looking at citizenship. You're also talking about divorce. That's exactly what we do. Call us, talk to us, and let's make sure that everything is straight going forward. How to get a work permit on SIGS if I go approved without DA? So right now, I believe what's happening is it is it is really going slow on the work permit for the SIGS and the deferred action. Now, if you have deferred action, then you would go ahead and follow up with applying for the work permit if you've already been approved for deferred action. My T visa application will be 2 years this coming March. What am I expecting this year? Well, you can expect either a request for evidence, a decision, which hopefully it's an approval. So come in March around the 2 year mark, that's when they're making those decisions. Wow, 12.4 likes. Thank you. And this, by doing that, by giving me your love, you're also, and sharing this live, you're also enabling other people to see this information, to be empowered in their immigration journey. So keep it going, guys, so people can see the live and get good information and get the opportunity to ask questions. Scrolling through. I submitted my son's paperwork from August. How long does it take? I receive letters of receipt. It depends on what kind of paperwork. If you're sponsoring your son, it also depends on how old your son is. If they're under 21, it tends to go faster. If you're a US citizen, I'd say it could go anywhere from 6 months to 12 months, especially if they're here in the outside of the US, then it's going to be a longer period of time. So it just depends. Any news on the visa pause? My husband got caught in that pause, but my stepkids received their visa. I'm so sorry. Right now, the pause continues. So they have filed a lawsuit, though, challenging this pause. So we may see some positive results from that. There are multiple lawsuits challenging the ban, so the country ban, as well as the pause on immigrant visas. So let's pray, let's keep our fingers crossed that we do see some positive results, that things can open up. But this is why I say, guys, apply now, because I'll give you an example of why taking action now strategically can be a good move. If you apply now, even with a pause in place, you apply now, And then a court finds that, yes, this is unlawful. No, you can't, the government cannot pause these immigrant visas. It opens up the door for your application to be processed again. You would already be in line, right? They would immediately start taking action on your case versus you waiting because of the pause and then trying to jump back in to apply later on. Now you're further down the line. So this is where I say, to secure your spot, make sure that you are still applying even with a pause. Of course, look at whether you qualify to apply first. I filed for asylum before my EB3 was approved. Can I go ahead with the filing? It's gonna depend. So, did you already overstay your time here? If that's the case, it might present a problem for adjustment of status for the EB3 petition. How to get a work permit living in Jamaica? You'd have to get a work visa. So they have work visas, temporary work visas that are not subject to the pause, by the way, but that's called a visa. Work permits are only issued for those people who are in the US, not outside of the US. If absent parents, so I answered that. My mom applied for my brother in 2021. I-130, he's married. We still not know what is the status. If he's married, I-130, he's looking at about 14 years right now. About 14 years. How long does the supplement B certification take before you can apply for the U visa? So it depends on the law enforcement agency and how long they take. For us, as long as the agency has agreed to certify, we've seen them in a month or two. I'd say more along the month timeline to get it back. If on your I-485 you had held to submit doc and put that you have never denied a visa and entry, is that true? If it's not true, then you need to look at correcting that ASAP so that it's not construed as any kind of fraud. And they can see that information too. So it doesn't make sense to put no when they are looking as far back as people's visas. They are going backwards, looking at people's visas to compare. So keep in mind, whatever you put on your visa in the past, it is going to come up in your interview, especially if whatever is on your visa application when you're getting your visitor's visa is different than what you put in your, say, adjustment of status application. That's a part of their fraud screening now. So very important that you even know or consider what you've put on the application in the past. If you have even intentionally put something false on an application before, there are possible ways to get forgiveness for it, but it's important to evaluate your risk before going into an interview or before filing so that you understand the risk and understand ways to mitigate that risk to get forgiveness for it. I filed I-751. A 48 months is about to end. Can I file for citizenship? So I answered that. Sounds like you have a divorce going on. You want to apply for citizenship. 48 months is about to end. Now you can get an aided stamp, a stamp in your passport that also is usually for a year that shows that you continue to be a permanent resident. So keep that in mind. But applying for citizenship is a possibility as well. Are they still approving VAWA? I filed in September 19, 2022. Nothing apart from prima facie, and the change I received was correspondence. The change I received was correspondence was received, and USCIS is reviewing in 2024. They are still approving VAWAs, absolutely. They may slow down a bit to do additional screenings, but yes, absolutely. If my husband is being held in Louisiana and his habeas was submitted, is it better to wait or self deport? I know this is a really hard question, and conditions are uh, can be very unbearable in detention, and it really comes down to a personal decision here. Uh, Filing a habeas in court is going to give you a fighting chance. If you self deport, it may render that issue moot in the federal court. When I say moot, it means, oh, well, they left already. They're no longer detained. The habeas is no longer a valid request of the court. And then they could basically throw it out or dismiss it based on that. So filing a habeas and waiting it out, because if you get your habeas granted and you ask to be released as a form of relief, then that could solve your issue, and then you could. What comes next depends on your particular circumstances. But this is happening in federal court. That's what I have now said. The fight for many cases is going to be in federal court, especially with them now blocking out, saying that within 15 days of an appeal, unless the BIA, a majority of the BIA, which is the Board of Immigration Appeals, votes to or reopen or accept the appeal, a majority of appeals are going to be dismissed within 15 days of filing. So it's scary. And the only recourse is to file in federal court. I say don't give up, though. If that's what you have to do, then file it in federal court. And you can always call us, talk to us about your situation so we can act very quickly. I've been doing my immigration process for 2 years. How long do I have to wait? I-130 from Yemen. So in many cases, if your country is a banned country, they are now pausing all applications if you're in the United States. If you're outside of the United States, then that could even be a different story as to whether your application will be considered. So it really just depends on particular circumstances here. I-485, how long will it take when you do your fingerprint? It depends on the type of I-485, employment, marriage-based, family-based. And I usually don't go from the date of biometrics. I usually go from date of filing. So I-485s, I would say a year to a year and a half at most. We've been seeing cases moving quickly on our end when we file the I-485, family-based I-485s. It's moving very quickly. So we're seeing more between the 2 to 6 month mark. There have been a few cases where they're doing additional checks, and those may take longer. But for the most part, preparing a solid case for the interview, it could be approved on the spot within 2 to 6 months. I appear in court for domestic violence, and my husband is a US citizen and he didn't want to file my paper. What happened? You do have the possibility to VAWA may be an option here. Sounds, and in many cases, I don't know what happened in your case. This is where you give us a call, talk to us. This is the way that you can get protection and take control of this process. Because in many cases, an abuser also frames the immigrant who is being abused by accusing them of domestic violence. We have seen those cases and won those cases. So make sure that you are talking to us. That is the way to make sure that you are protected, that you can move forward in the process and get your papers here, get your protection here. Sitting down in silence is not going to help you. So, and our consultation is confidential, and there is no hurt in contacting us in our safe space so we can talk it through with you. All right, I'm going to take one more question and then I'm going to go. Let's see. I saw, let me see, I'm just scrolling to see. I started filing for my VAWA since March 2025, but nothing is happening with my case. It takes time. So, usually for the work permit, I would say anywhere from 6 months to 12 months. And then after that, there's going to be another gap of time before you actually get the approval. But I would say right now, the important thing is to get that protection. Is undocumented immigrants still being detained at USCIS at their green card adjustment of status interview? So I'm going to say this, that with it really is on a case by case basis. We have gone through multiple adjustment of status interviews where our clients had a history of overstaying, and all of them were approved. However, it does not mean to say that it is not happening. We know it's happening. We've seen it with our own eyes. Usually, with cases like that, there is some factor that has caused them to be targeted. For example, we saw it at the San Diego offices in California, but it wasn't necessarily widespread. And we saw in some cases where people are being detained, it's because there is a history of fraud or there's suspicion of fraud on the spot. So this is where it's very important to prepare your case, make sure that you fully understand your risks and understand how you can address those risks before the interview. For example, if you know that there is going to be a suspicion of fraud or there's an argument the officer can make that there's fraud, there are ways to get that forgiven and considered by the officer so that you are not necessarily caught up in a detention, but rather the officer can make a decision on the waiver, grant the forgiveness, and you can move forward. That's just an example. So I would say if you qualify, a majority of people are moving through the process still. Though it's scary and nerve wracking, the best way you can approach that is by covering yourself. Talk to an attorney about your situation, screen for possible higher risk factors to yourself to be able to be prepared, increase your chances of success, and to avoid situations like detention. The worst thing you can do, though, is not have anything at all, especially where you do qualify for adjustment of status. All right. With that being said, I am going to head out. It was so nice to spend time with you. Thank you again for the love. Thank you for the great questions. I'm going to be back, but here's what I say: like, subscribe, follow, hit the notification bell. That is how you're going to see when I come on, and you can join me, ask your questions. I can provide you updates, right? Because it's a busy time, guys. We're in the trenches, and unfortunately, I don't have a set time that I can be on. So I just say follow, like, subscribe, and I have many videos that I do as well to provide updates, especially urgent updates that I think matter to you all. All right. Thank you again. Thanks so much for the well wishes. Go ahead, give us a call. That's where you're gonna get the take true action in your case to get what you need to achieve the goal here in the US, right? Give us a call. The phone number, go to the link in the profile, link in bio, link in description of the video on Facebook and YouTube. Go there, give us a call. We have a 24/7 phone line. So where they will talk to you and help you to get started with us, right? All right. Have a good night, everybody. Bye bye.